with partners all, thanks, Gemma, all around the globe. We work with alumni networks, we work with more complex network of networks, leadership networks, etc. And of course, we also have a lot of friends and partners and collaborators with us on this journey. There are some names you can hear. We have a lot of other events happening this month, with which my colleague will share a bit later about, but feel free to check out all of our sort of other people who also joined us on this journey. You can see some names here. So specifically, why did Enact happen? Why are we here today? It's a bit bigger than just the desire to talk about networks. You know, so we all know networks, we all are part of networks, and we all benefit from networks. But I think thinking about how networks can be leveraged and used for transformation, for transformative change, I think some of these things are a little less understood and explored. And so we really wanted to, you know, think about how can we tackle the more complex challenges that face us today in the world, and how we know that no one single entity can take that over and sort of, you know, handle that. So how can we think about innovation and scaling change and collaboration? We do this at InHive, you know, through our own network, which is called Nexus, which is a network of networks that InHive essentially runs and drives, but is actually made up of lots of members, which includes small and big networks. But when we were thinking about how to really amplify and really further the discourse of around networks, we thought about this this month, you know, where we sort of then thought to put this on. So this is a month where we have a series of online events. This is basically for anyone who's even remotely interested in networks, but also specifically network leaders, coordinators, funders, community builders, activists. Really, it's just anyone who's interested and wants to learn more. We have a lot of events that spans across 130 countries. We've invited around 120 speakers. You know, there's something for everyone. We have storytelling, we have dialogues, we have pitch practice, we have mini technique workshops, and this is one of those here today. And we also have live problem solving. And then we also cover lots of different themes and topics and areas. You can check those out on our website later. And of course, today we have a wonderful panel. You know, we have Jannik, Bonnie, and Lucía joining us today, and I'll be handing over to them very soon. So you'll be able to hear from them directly. Just one thing before I hand off is that we really, really hope that you take something away today and learn something new, but we also hope that the impact that you're able to create, you know, after this session is far-reaching, and that this sort of seeps into changing mindsets and behaviors, and that this is just the start of a conversation. And we'll also be following up in June with some of, you know, we'll also be sort of following up with our participants to sort of take this conversation further. Thank you. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Cool. Jannik, over to you. If you can just take us off. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Very excited to be here and to see the interest in the topic. So I'm Jannik from Unity Effect. Personally, I'm quite passionate about measuring impact, especially network contexts. But I know that there might be different associations as well around this. And I think one of the challenges is that with networks, it's really difficult sometimes to really track the impact because it happens at the periphery. So the thing, or what I will present is how to use stories, impact stories, and more specifically, I will present a method for how to track, analyze, and visualize stories of impact within networks. And the aim is to inspire you to use stories not only as anecdotal information, but really strategically to both understand and measure the impact of your network. And we will do it live. So we will do a live demo. I'll give this over to Lucía.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jannik. It's really exciting to be here. I'm with Bonnie as well. We work at the Social Investment Consultancy. So we are a consultancy specialized in impact evaluation. So also really passionate about measuring impact and really trying to understand the change that is happening with different types of initiatives, and specifically with networks now. We have been involved in the learning journey and evaluation of a network of networks as well. So it's really something that excites us. And what we want to offer today is a technique to map systems, because networks are really complex. And so this is something that a trial that we want to do with you. I mean, something that we have done before, but we want to try with you today to go through your experience and just piece by piece understand the kind of influence that you want to have in systems, and to understand a little bit better what are the systems that you want to influence in your work. So that is also the practical exercise that we'll do today together.
Thanks, Jannik. Thanks, Lucía. Perfect. So just to introduce the structure of the session, you will be receiving an invitation to join breakout rooms. Jannik will be in one, and Lucía and Bonnie will be in the other room, and they'll be presenting the techniques that they both mentioned. Feel free to choose any room, but of course, once you choose one room, please do stay there. We'll spend about 20-25 minutes in that room, and you'll have a chance to learn directly from either Lucía and Bonnie or Jannik. Gemma, if you could just open the breakout rooms, that would be great.
Great. All right. So what I will do is in a minute show you a survey and then send you the link that you can fill it out, and then we will visualize the results and create our story landscape in short. The intention is to turn a bit around how impact evaluation is usually done, which is quite often that you have a survey, you have some quantitative metrics, and at the end, maybe you have an open text field and you ask for any other information, right? But this is sometimes, I think, not appropriate for networks, where the impact, the change happens at the periphery, it's indirect, happens because you form new connections. So what the idea is to turn it around, to start with stories and really invite people. So this is the idea, to share their stories of impact, something they experienced, a change linked to the network. And then after sharing the story, the idea is then to also cluster and quantify that story for different things. And this is what we will model here. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the survey I'm going to share with you. The invitation is to do it, to not overthink when you fill it out, because it's really just a test. But the general idea is to capture moments and stories of network impact. And we will try it with us here as we are in the room. So I would ask you to think about a moment within your own network or at the Enact Festival in a network context that was impactful for you. Think about a moment that was impactful in the last weeks, ideally, but can also be further back. In your conversation and your connection, moment of success, anything. Then, when you do that, I ask you to share about that moment, and we will have 5 minutes in total, so it's not so much, maybe just a few sentences. Give the moment a name, title, and then there are some additional information, like the main group of actors. So for example, if it was you personally or a group that was responsible for that moment, on whom it had an effect. And then we also ask about your inner capacities that made that moment possible. You can select multiple and then the most important one. And then also the supportive conditions in the network context that made that moment, that story possible. And again, you can select multiple and then the most important one. And then please click on send. And then I'll set up a visualization in the background for us in our story landscape. Any questions how this works? And I hope you will have some time after to also just brainstorm like how this could be used, but now really about the process itself. Do you have any questions? Does not seem to be the case. You missed the instructions. I shared a survey in the chat. I'll set a timer. I will tell you 1 minute before, so you have 5 minutes to fill out a survey and click on send. And then we will have a look at the results and how to use actually this technique. I will reshare the link as well. Thank you, Francisca. Great. 5 minutes. Okay, 2 more minutes. And 1 more minute. I see first responses coming in. No, it's not a lot of time. Okay, and even if it's not complete yet, I ask you to click on send, also because I have to quickly do a copy paste in the back of it, and I'll do this in a few seconds. Okay. So I think we do have our story landscape. I'm very surprised. It's the first time I'm doing this. I hope it works. Let's give it a try. And I'll quickly copy paste our map to you actually. So you could navigate yourself, but I will just share my screen and then we can see. So again, as a quick recap, how this works, it's really more going up the story first, so that it's possible to track actually or to gather information where the impact is happening, and then afterwards to actually in a way categorize it and make it also comparable. And the kind of clusters that we used, like the impact on, the inner capacities and so on, this of course you can change or adjust. So this was just set up now for this specific purpose for trying out the exercise. And what we have here, what you can see, so I hope you can see, are in gray the stories that you shared. And you could click on it, read it, and see what the people selected. The nice thing is, by having these categories, it's now also possible to cluster. So for example, on whom the story have an impact. And we see most of the stories had an impact on myself or my community or network, not so many on society as a whole, but there is one. Would be interesting now to read it. We can also use the inner capacities, for example. And what is now, for example, interesting, we can have the inner capacities, but we can also put the supportive conditions in. And now what we can do is those that are actually close to each other share the same stories. So you could say that they are in a way mutually enforcing each other, or in stories, these capacities and conditions usually happen at the same time or simultaneously. For example, transparent communication, and dedicated time and space. Here, curiosity. And this goes also for the others. So those that are close to each other are in a way similar. And this is a way how to dive deeper into the structure of the network, for example. It would also be possible to ask difficult moments and then ask what was lacking, for example. So this is a way to somehow understand the deeper structure of a network. Also, what is interesting here, the clusters of stories, again, those that are close to each other in a way probably share similar capacities. So now it could be interesting, for example, if we see that certain clusters are forming, to dive into these stories and analyze what do they have in common, and how can we somehow strengthen what those people experience during these stories and potentially also transfer to other contexts. So this just to give a first teaser of how this is possible to work with stories and these kinds of story landscapes. And now I would pause and actually open up the floor. And I would be curious what you think. Maybe also if you think this is useful or what the challenges might be in applying such a method or working with stories in your contexts. And I think we can just go with quickly raising hands or quickly writing. Yeah, maybe just quickly indicating. Deborah.
First of all, thank you so much. I think it's fascinating, even to just know about a new tool that is also going away a bit from following indicators and only looking at the own scope. However, thinking of GDPR and also company policies, is my assumption correct that Kumu is basically only working with, Google Docs, and or do you know anything else about this? What the platforms could be working together with?
Yeah, I mean, we are working with Kumu quite a bit. Also to say there is no affiliation that we have with them. They do a live embed with Google Sheets, but also with other formats. So sometimes JSON files, for example. So you could also work with databases, but we also did. And then we stored the data on German servers and still used Kumu to visualize it. Kumu is based in the US and has reading rights to the data. They don't have any other rights but reading rights. So we used it also in German context or European contexts and GDPR compliant to our understanding.
Yeah, thank you. What was the one that you mentioned, which instead of Google Docs or Google Sheets?
JSON file.
Okay.
There are other ways to do a live embed so that Kumu has access to the data and visualizes it.
Thank you.
Welcome. Tamara.
Thank you, Jannik. I need some basic help understanding the differences between the colors in the story maps, please. So like where the circles are green or yellow.
Yeah.
And blue.
Yeah, to say the colors, I chose them randomly, right? But basically green, there's also a legend, means a supportive condition of the network, that's green. And orange is an inner capacity. Right, and if you would click on
I see.
impact on, then this would be blue. So there's a legend in the Kumu map at the bottom left side. And this is just as a visual support.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Tim?
Yeah, I was wondering if you could give an example of a sort of common theme that you've identified in a network that you were working with, like, or was it that this kind of story mapping was allowing to surface that otherwise would have been difficult to see, maybe?
I'll also say this is like we are just starting out doing this. We didn't implement it yet on large scale, but examples I know, for example, is the one I like is where they asked nurses about their working conditions and especially then they checked like their stories. And then afterwards they asked, how satisfied are you with your job and how compliant are you with the rules? And in general, they found either you are compliant with the rules or you are satisfied with your job, but usually not both, because the rules prevent you from actually doing what you want to do. But there were a few exemptions of nurses that were both compliant and satisfied with their job, and then they went into these stories. So what is it that these nurses do specifically that allows them to actually be satisfied while being compliant? And I don't know exactly then what they found out, but this is how you could use this technique. And here in this specific case, of course, it's a bit difficult because we all come from different networks, right? So we can't just dive into one network and understand it deeper. But we could find out, for example, if if you do this, for example, after certain conferences, and after one conference, there's a lot of stories emerging because of the great facilitation, right? Or the space created to a network, then you would understand actually that creating that kind of space to a network is having an impact on people, just in terms of logic. But to say, this is very beginning. One thing you're also setting up in the back is indicator databases that are validated academically so that you can actually also bring the science into the stories.
Nice.
Tamara?
Thank you. If we were in the same network and we were doing this, and one of our story, and can you tell me what does it mean if one of the dots is on the outside versus on the inside?
I mean, there it means that not so many stories or people sharing the stories connected it to these specific capacities or supportive conditions. But it can also, or as we had it with this impact on, there was just one story that had an impact on society. So we know that this is little represented. And then, of course, this can have different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the idea. And if you look at it, sometimes, they're really like clusters forming, or yeah, if this is something that you want to strengthen, like having an impact on society, then of course, we should look at it more specifically. Why is it that only one story has that? Yeah. There was also one question I'll briefly respond to, like how often to do this. I guess it depends a bit, of course, on the net cycles of conferences and things that you do in your network. But one thing that would be helpful probably is to give every story a timestamp when it occurred, so that you can build this in. We didn't do this here. The other thing, just as a general recommendation, usually it's hard to actually gather these stories if you send out a survey. So I would always integrate it in things that you do as a network. For example, as a method, right? Because this we could now actually use, and we could go further into discussion, talking about your stories, doing breakouts and so on. So embedding it in the kind of facilitation that you do in your networks to actually do gather these stories. Sophia?
Hi. At the top of my head, I could see this tool working with two different ways. For example, could it be useful if you wanted to approach a specific target group and see how some issues or some stories to come up basically with things that are very interesting in this specific group and work towards that? Can this tool basically bring up these similarities basically, or like if there are some focal points there, they can bring up basically issues that are interested in this specific group, right? Or things that affect this specific group. And then again, you can get an idea and then share it throughout your network to make sure if this affects other groups as well. For example, could it be this an inductive and deductive way of approaching this?
I would say absolutely, yes. That you can see similarities, you can see differences. You can also add like the group, for example, as one of the things that you track in the survey, of course, and then you could include it in your analysis or visualization. Yeah. Okay. We don't have so much time left. Not sure if there is a quick comment or a question.
Is it free?
Well, yes. Kumu is free public maps. Closed maps cost $20 a month. And the other thing that we have is a Google Sheet, right? Google Survey, Google Sheet.
But if you were, my sympathies. Anyway, I hope the breakout rooms were helpful, and I popped in and it was very interesting for me to hear what was going on. We now have around 9 minutes, and we're just going to keep this space a bit open. I'll invite Jannik, Bonnie, and Lucía to just share maybe some highlights and overview. I know it's a very massive task. And then also, please feel free to share any remaining questions or comments or concerns in chat. And Jannik, Lucía, and Bonnie can also sort of address those as they sort of share their closing statements. Can I this time hand over to Lucía or Bonnie to take us through the last bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we had a very diverse group in our room, which is very interesting because what we were trying to do in that session is really, first of all, starting to understanding the systems that each organization or each network is trying to evaluate, because that is something very important to do before starting any kind of measurement, is just trying to understand what is the system that you want to influence. So that was our first question. And we had a very, diverse group with people focusing on entrepreneurship, the biosecurity sector, lifelong learning, so very diverse. But the idea here was just to start this. What we tried to convey is that it's the starting point, just trying to understand the change that you want to bring, and then you can measure it, like with doing things maybe with. It's very complementary probably with what Jannik was doing, trying to understand the change that you're doing. But before that, it's very good to map that out. And we talked about 5 R's, the resources, rules, roles, and relationships and results, that are the different pieces that you can do when trying to dissect that system that you want to influence. And we saw that it's quite challenging to do that, but we had a good conversation with some of the participants, and hopefully we can give them some leads for understanding their work a little bit better. I don't know if Bonnie, if you would like to add something.
No, all good.
Go ahead, Jannik. I'm also seeing a lot of requests for resources or any other helpful links that you guys may have. So yeah, just that's a chat. Yes, Jannik, over to you.
Yeah, also just sharing in the chat. So what we did was, working with stories, as mentioned earlier on. So we had the chance to share a story of impact that we experienced, and afterwards we created a visualization and had a look at it, and basically then had a discussion of how to make use of this technique. So for example, how to use it for impact measurement, but also understanding shared issues within the network, different, for example, also how different teams or how to make use of this technique, basically, of working with stories. I'm wondering, I think I'll leave it there on this level. Maybe somebody from the group would share a highlight or what they took with them.
Yeah, sure. If anyone wants to ask any specific question, we have a few minutes. Otherwise, I can also just maybe, I guess, invite Jannik and Lucía and Bonnie to maybe share, I don't know, a few tips or some extra things to look out for, or any other tips for beginners, or places to look, or sort of, to sort of get more insight and knowledge and information. But maybe a couple of minutes to see if anyone has any questions.
I can start. So I think measuring impact of networks, it can feel such a daunting task. So I think don't aim for perfection. Just try to start somewhere, measure something really small, and then iterate and learn from that. And also the other thing I'll say, it's easy to get trapped by indicators because it's so hard to find what actually can represent measuring some of the really huge impact that you've got. So I would really encourage you to think of very simple indicators, even using some output indicators as proxy indicators for some of the longer term change. And I would also suggest that this is a great place for you to meet peers, and we need more people sharing actual indicators that are used so that we can really learn from each other and not reinvent the wheel.
And well, the one thing that I can add is what I shared in the breakout. I think when working with impact, for me, the question always is like how to make it meaningful. Even the process of measuring impact itself, it can start with trying to, in a participatory way, for example, do a systems mapping, trying to identify what we actually want to measure, what we care about, and then also integrate the measurement itself into activities that you do as a network. We work with stories. Working with stories can also be used as a method itself for facilitation, right? And I think this is something that has proven to be successful, not sending out surveys waiting for responses, but really using impact measurement as a tool to empower the network and the participants in it.
Thanks, Jannik. I'm also seeing some LinkedIn profiles being shared in chat. I think that's wonderful. If anyone wants to sort of connect or specifically want to reach out to anyone, feel free to use the chat to share your contact details or request anyone else's. Any other comments from the audience or questions or anything? We still have 5 minutes to pick Jannik, Bonnie, and Lucia's brains. Thanks, Rana.
Maybe something I would add, it's great to have these two different just starting points with just to talk about impact. And I think it's really great to think about the stories that you want to tell, and having a tool like this where you can just put visually the change that you're bringing from the, what we shared about mapping the system and the different pieces of the change that you want to bring, and then having something visual like what Jannik was sharing, and actually not just thinking about having a whole set of tools from the indicators to maybe more qualitative stories, and using all that to really tell your story about the change that you're bringing. And I feel that it's a good example of, there are so many ways to telling that the story of the work that you're doing, and just encourage you to explore those. And yeah, it's just a matter of sharing the amazing work that you're doing, and probably also very importantly, learning about it so you can continue to do the great work.
Sorry, I don't know if I can jump into this, but the subject of monitoring evaluation is something that I find so meaningful, and always something that intrigues and excites me. So I don't know if the speakers can share more resources, especially as it relates to how to identify with baseline, and also how you can, determine your indicators so that affects input and output, and, all of those ways of actually getting to, do the proper monitoring and evaluation of your impact network.
Well, I don't have a resource off the top of my head, but of course, feel free to reach out. And if somebody else has, please share.
Yeah, we do have, we share the slide as well. We included a few links to, first of all, some just frameworks to map, some of the things that you need to consider for network impact evaluation, because it's very important. That's why we really wanted to bring this systems change lens, because evaluating impact for networks is particularly, it has its specificities. And then, yeah, there will be a few links there that we can share for you to maybe start thinking about your theory of change, and then moving for indicators, things like that.
Thank you. I love this exchange of resources that's happening. Sorry, Dennis. Jannik, I think there's a question for you specifically. If the story map will stay online for some time, Andrea would like to check it out a bit later.
Yeah, I think there is no personal data. So in that sense, it might be okay, maybe until the end of the Enact festival, and then we will take it down. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone who joined today, but of course, thank you so much, Jannik, Lucía, and Bonnie, for giving us your time and skills and expertise. I just want to remind everyone, as shared in the beginning, and I think Gemma shared it in chat, please do check out our website, Inhype's website. The whole Enact schedule is there. There are a few other events lined up, and hopefully we'll find something else that you would be interested in attending as well. Yeah, and I guess we just take a quick moment, unmute ourselves at the same time, and then just say bye to each other, and have a great and restful weekend, everyone. So would love to hear some loud goodbyes. If you can just unmute yourself and go for it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good to see all of you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks so much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lucía. Thanks, Jannik, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it was great. Perfect. I'll be in touch via email, of course, with some post things and thank yous, and then we can just exchange. You can just share the recordings later, and I'll in touch.
Sounds good.
Have a great weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.